What is up, guys? It is your boy Serge. So today I want to talk to you about how to build your own gaming PC, and also want to show you what it's like to play on a $400 gaming PC to see if it's worth it for you guys. So a lot of you guys are searching around trying to figure out, do I want to spend $300, do I want to spend $400, $500, $600, maybe even $800 to $1,000 on a gaming PC, and I want to show you that there are some pretty good possibilities with just $400. You can build a great kick-ass gaming PC like the one I have right over here. So if you take a look at this, I'm going to show you the performance of this current $400 gaming PC. I'm going to show you how to build it all in one video, and I can help you guys find parts to upgrade your PC in the future and how to specifically build this particular gaming PC. So first up, let's take a look at the actual gaming performance of this computer, and then I'm going to show you how to actually build it. Let's take a look.
Thank you.
This close to them. Risky business. Oh, that was close. Holy shit. Did you see that he fired his gun?
Yep.
Damn. God, this thing's a freaking beast. Oh, God. Uh-oh. Pterodactyl. Or something like that. So many polygons. Oh my God. So let's take a look at the system that we're going to be building today. Here's what the system looks like when it's fully built. The only difference here is that the cords are disorganized. Now you see them organized. Throughout our build process, I'm going to introduce you to small little tips that can help you save tons of time. Cord management is going to be pretty essential. If you don't organize the cords, it's going to be really hard to get in there and upgrade the parts in the future, and overall it's just really good for airflow. Take a look at this little Velcro strap that you can cut off from the spool and then just kind of wrap it around your wires. It's a pretty impressive system. Let's go take a look at our case. Alright, here we have our power cord. Unwrap that. Our case comes with a bunch of screws, but hold off, don't use these screws quite yet, and hold on to that speaker because we will plug it in later on. These screws are mostly for either the motherboard or installing drives into your computer. Drives would be like CD-ROM drives, or like hard drives, we're gonna plug in the speaker into our motherboard when we get a chance here. Familiarize yourself with the cords that come with this power supply. So what we have here is the 24-pin power connector. This connector here supplies most of the power to your motherboard. The other connectors you see here on the right are Molex, and then on the left is a Sata connector. The Sata connector is a newer type of standard. However, both standards are included in most power supplies, so you shouldn't have to worry about having one or the other. Here's our 4-pin motherboard connector. That one will also be for powering the motherboard. Then we have our front header connectors, like our USB, our audio, our power switch, reset switch, and hard drive and power LEDs. Hard drive and power LEDs are just little lights that flash that tell you when the computer's on. The power switch and reset switch are just buttons that you click on the case to either turn the case on or reset it. The HD audio is for things like sound, and the USB is for our universal serial bus connectors. Let's have a look inside our case. So since we have a smaller ITX motherboard, we're going to have only 4 holes to work with here. Some motherboards will be a lot larger than the one that we've used, and they'll utilize the outer holes that you see there on the side. Our case came with a 380 watt power supply. This should be pretty good for our build, as our build is only realistically going to require around 300 watts or less. On the sides there, you see the back panels where your video card will connect to. You also see your I/O shield area where your inputs and outputs from your motherboard will be. Over here you see our drives area. At the bottom you can connect smaller drives, at the top you can connect bigger drives. The bigger drives area really isn't used as often anymore. However, the area below it is used more frequently for things like your solid state drive or your hard drive disk. Let's have a look at our first motherboard here. So this is an ITX Gigabyte motherboard. I chose the ITX form factor because it's small. ITX is a type of class of motherboards that are much smaller than the ones that we're used to seeing. I really like this one because I feel like it has a good selection of ports. We have our old mouse and keyboard ports, USB, Wi-Fi, DVI, 2 HDMIs, Ethernet, USB-C, 2 extra USBs, and then our audio connectors. I feel like this motherboard gives you a lot of value for its price. In the center we have our CPU socket. This one here is an Intel CPU socket. The pins are on the motherboard and they're going to connect with the CPU. Here's what our motherboard looks like from the top-down view. To the right, you see those 2 big slots. Those are going to be where we're going to insert our RAM. Those are our RAM slots. At the bottom, we have our PCI Express slot. This is where the video card will connect. This will allow you to do things like gaming, watching videos and movies. It's the slot that's specifically designed for video cards or other peripherals that require a lot of speed. On the right there, you're going to see more power connectors, and in the middle right there, you see our front headers. That will be for like our power switch. At the top, we have more power connectors and more headers. We also have a main USB header. Not all cases will support that. Came included with our motherboard is the I/O shield. This is our inputs and outputs shield that we're going to connect into our case. Our motherboard is going to connect to it as well. I'll show you how that works in a second. But first, let's have a look at our CPU. I chose the G44 Intel because it was fairly fast for around 50 bucks, and there's really nothing faster for that price range. It can run all your games on high, and you could even do productivity related tasks like 3D rendering, video editing, and even music production. It's a pretty powerful little CPU. Let's have a look at it. So the CPU is probably the most complex and tends to be the more expensive thing in our build. However, in this build, since it's a budget build, it's only really 50 bucks. Here's our CPU manual. It's got some instructions on how to install the CPU. However, you probably won't be needing this, as I'll be showing you how to install the CPU. I'll be showing you how to install this one here, this Intel one, and also an AMD one. So looking around on the motherboard, there is quite a bit going on with it, but once you start breaking it down, it really becomes a lot more simple. It makes a lot of sense. If you guys have any questions, definitely leave a comment down below because I will be replying to all comments. On the bottom left there, we have a M2 connection for really fast hard drives called SSD drives that support NVMe. Those drives are extremely fast. Let's go ahead and install our CPU. Every motherboard is going to have a type of cage that's around the CPU socket. You're going to want to lift that up. Let's take a look at our CPU. There's going to be a notch on the far right and a notch on the far left. You're going to want to line these notches up before you install the CPU into the motherboard. To install the CPU, you just kind of want to line the notches up and just plop the CPU in there. You really don't need to do much more. Once it falls in place, you'll just verify that it's lined up with the little triangle there at the bottom left, and if the triangles match, then that means you have it good to go. So start putting the cage back on, then lift the door back up and make sure the cage is properly aligned and under that screw at the very bottom you see there. And slowly start moving the little lever down, and that'll secure your CPU. It's really not that uncommon to hear weird crunching sounds, and you're gonna feel a pretty good amount of resistance when you're bringing down that lever. So don't worry, bring down the lever and secure it. Here we have our CPU heatsink. This little item here is responsible for keeping our CPU cool. So lots of data and information and electricity flows through the CPU. Since it does do most of the work, it does need to be cooled. We have some thermal paste that we're going to put on top of our CPU. This is going to allow our CPU to cool a little bit better. Some heat sinks come with thermal paste already. However, I do like to add more to make sure my device is a little bit cooler. Plus, previously I had removed my heatsink, so the thermal paste had to be removed. Anytime you remove a heatsink, you're going to want to add more thermal paste. The Intel heatsinks are very easy to put on. Line them up with the 4 holes on the motherboard, and then simply push the heatsink onto the CPU. It's very, very easy and simple. Then once you're certain you've done that, you want to lift the motherboard up by the CPU. Let's take a look at our RAM. So RAM is responsible for loading information from the hard drive and storing it there temporarily while you work on it. Let's go ahead and get it installed. So RAM has little notches, a little notch sort of in the center of the stick. If you're attempting to install it and the notches don't match, most likely you're about to install the RAM incorrectly and you risk breaking the RAM or the motherboard. Make sure the notches line up, insert it, and push in at the very top and bottom, like so. Have a look from this different angle here. Kind of shows a much better picture of how to install the RAM. The RAM can sometimes get stuck, so you may need to pull it out and then reposition it and then push it in again. Most of the time, the little arms that snap into place, like you see there at the bottom right, they'll snap in on their own once you've pushed the RAM deep enough. You usually don't even need to use your hands to snap them in on their own. So we have our CPU and our RAM installed. Now it's time to insert this into our motherboard. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at the I/O shield and get that installed. So the I/O shield basically makes sure that when you're plugging in peripherals into the back of the motherboard, that you don't accidentally put them through a weird hole where they don't belong. So let's go ahead and get this installed. So bring the shield in from within the case and push very hard. Some I/O shields just are extremely hard to install, so make sure you apply ample pressure while trying to install them. I had to push quite hard. I must have applied anywhere from 20 pounds, maybe 25 pounds of force on each corner to install the I/O shield. Sometimes they're just really difficult to install. Let's go ahead and pick up our motherboard, again by the CPU, and then insert it. Once you insert it, the I/O shield is going to be pushing back at the motherboard. In other words, your motherboard's screw holes are not going to be properly aligned. You're going to want to make sure that those screw holes are aligned with the holes in the case, or else you won't be able to screw the motherboard in properly. Right now, I'm pushing the motherboard towards the I/O shield. See how if I release pressure, it just goes back to not being aligned? You're going to have to continuously push on the motherboard towards the I/O shield until you can get a screw in there. Let's go ahead and get our first screw in there. But before we do, we're going to make sure all 4 holes are properly lined up with the holes in the case. And it looks like they are. So let's go ahead and get that installed. The screws that came with my motherboard are the ones that you're going to want to use. Try to avoid using the ones that go with the case because they're not always going to work with the motherboard. Sometimes you may need to use a combination of screws if you don't have the right ones. We're going to probably use the one on the far right there or the one in the middle. The one on the far left is usually used for screwing in drives like hard drives, CD-ROM drives. We're probably not even going to potentially use that one. It really depends on how big the screw holes are. Check to see if these screw in. If there's way too much resistance and the screw gets stuck, don't use it because you're not going to be able to fully screw the screw in anyway. I use a power tool so I can speed up the whole screwing in process, but you can use any, Phillips screwdriver or any screwdriver you have laying around that could work. Some people even have used knives before. When I was making my first build, I didn't even have a screwdriver. I just used a knife to install it. It was pretty hilarious. Don't recommend you do that, but if you don't have the right tools, you may need to improvise. Once you got the screws installed, just verify that everything's properly in there. I always do opposing screw sides. I'll do one at the bottom right and then I'll do one at the top left, and then I can screw the other screws in later once I've completed and verified that the build works. The reason I don't do the other screws is because, well, why should I? If there's a problem, I'm gonna need to probably remove the motherboard or remove more parts anyway, so I'm only gonna screw in all the screws when I know that everything is working. Let's have a look at our video card. So I chose this particular video card because it's only about $100 and it's gonna run all your games on high graphics at 1080p. It's got a mini display port connection at the very top there, HDMI and DVI, so it's got 3 different types of connection types. So regardless of what monitor you have, this should work quite well. The only downside is that it has a 6-pin connector. Usually video cards for around $100 don't have 6-pin connectors. That's the connector that you're gonna use to power the video card. In other words, the video card needs extra power. Here's our storage, the PNY 120GB SSD drive. So this drive is very simple. In the United States, you can buy this drive in almost any store. Any big box store like Walmart is gonna have them, Fred Meyer. Let's have a look at the solid state drive. So solid state drives are surprisingly light. They have 2 connectors. To install a video card, for our particular case, we're going to need to pry these doors open before we can install the video card. Now the thing is, if you don't do this, then you won't be able to put your video card in there because your input-output ports are going to need to go through there and you just won't be able to. Some cases, you actually just unscrew a screw and then those just fly right off quite easily. But for my particular case, because it's a budget case, you literally just have to rip those little mini doors out before you can install the video card. So let's take a look at the video card and install it. You have these little notches right here, and they're gonna go between the case and the motherboard. So let's go ahead and put them in. At the very bottom, you see the PCI Express array pins area. You're gonna wanna stick it in there. All right, we're lining it up and we're making sure our input output ports are going in, and we're also going to be pushing towards that area a little bit simultaneously while we push down.
The only thing you'll need is a Phillips screwdriver. However, I use a power tool to expedite the process.
Push kind of firmly. Remember, you're going to want to apply a little bit of force to get it to work. There's also a latch that latches in as you're doing it. So here's our 6-pin connector. Because our power supply doesn't come with one, we're using an adapter that was provided to us with the video card. So with this 6-pin adapter, you just want to install it into the video card. And then those Molex connections, the ones you see at the bottom there, plug those into a female version of the Molex connectors from the power supply. Let's go ahead and get our video card screwed in there. I try to make sure that I don't over tighten the screws, because over tightening the screws can risk damaging either the motherboard or the actual video card itself. So tighten the screws firmly, but don't tighten them too firm. Here we have our heatsink power connector. I'm gonna go ahead and connect that because without that connected, our CPU won't be able to cool and our system just won't even run. You have to have that connected or else the CPU just won't be able to do anything. It'll just overheat and then shut itself off. So here are our Molex connectors. We're going to go ahead and connect them. These connectors provide a lot of resistance when you're connecting them the first couple times. So when you're plugging them in, just really try as hard as you can.
But if they're still not going in, kind of like how you see here, remember you can move the little cords around, and that's going to move the male ends around. So sometimes you need to reposition them because they won't properly insert to the female end, and you just have to kind of wiggle them around while you're doing it. All right, so now that we got that plugged in, we're gonna want to do a little bit of cord management, because without it, it's gonna get really messy. So we got our little Velcro strap. We're gonna go ahead and wrap it around the cords. It's gonna provide better airflow. It'll provide better workflow management. So next time when I need to install other components, I'll be able to get in there much easier. I'll be able to see what's inside there easier. So I highly recommend you guys do this during the build process. Any type of cord management will work. You could even use tape if you really have to. I'm gonna go ahead and put our solid state drive right onto the Velcro. I've already attached some Velcro to the actual P&Y drive itself to make it much easier to manage. I'm gonna show you how you can also screw in the P&Y drive into the drive slot. For now, I'm just gonna get the power connected and I'm gonna put it on the Velcro strap. All right, so we're gonna plug it in. This little connector is called our Sata connector. Once we got the power plugged in, we'll then need to connect our data connection. Let's get our 4-pin power connector plugged in into our motherboard. So the motherboard is gonna draw quite a bit of power, and it's gonna redistribute it to all the other components inside your computer. You're definitely gonna wanna plug that in. Now let's do our 24-pin connector. That one's usually parallel with the RAM slot. So if you're having a hard time finding it, know that it's usually near the RAM. Go ahead and get it lined up. And it's in there. Gonna do a little bit more cord management to make sure everything's looking nice. All right, gonna wrap it around. Okay, it's looking pretty good. I made that particular one fairly thick because in the future when I need more cord management, I can just cut it off straight from that particular one there. All right, so here's what it looks like. The cords are fairly organized. I've seen better cord management, but for now this will have to do because it's just a good way to keep everything somewhat organized while we move forward. All right, now let's plug in our SATA connector for data transfer. So there's gonna be one connection on the drive itself and then one connection in the motherboard. Go ahead and get that connected now. All right, there it is. I try to keep it a little bit organized by plugging it into the first one, but sometimes if you can't reach the first SATA connector, you can plug it into the third one or the other ones. It shouldn't really matter too much, but when you start having more drives, it becomes confusing. So try to plug it in order from either 1 or 0, and then move up towards the other numbers as you add extra drives. Remember, you can always improve the cord management situation. Here, I'm gonna take the SATA connector and I'm gonna wrap it around the CPU heatsink to just make it a little bit more clean looking, a little bit more organized. Same thing with the heatsink connector as well. All right, it's looking a lot nicer. Man, I'm really excited. This little $300 computer is gonna kick butt. I've already done testing on this one, and it runs everything really well. And it really is like a PlayStation 4 killer. I mean, it runs all my games and it has Windows. What more could I ask for? All right, so this next part is one of the most annoying parts, simply because these little connectors are extremely annoying to connect because they're small. So let's do our HD audio connection. So when you look at the motherboard, there is these pins just kind of coming out, and you're gonna wanna connect them to that. This one here is called the F audio connection, and it's missing a pin, and you can line that up while you're plugging it in. They're usually near the audio jacks, so when you're looking for it on the motherboard, it'll be near the audio jacks. All right, let's go ahead and get that plugged in. And you really can only plug it into the correct one because they have special notches in there. If you try to plug it in somewhere else, it usually won't work. Let's get our front USB ports working. All right, So usually there's at least 2 to 3 different USB areas you can plug in, but in my particular case, there's really only just one more. Let's see, where's it at here? Okay, there it is. So it was actually perpendicular to my front audio. Let's get that plugged in there. All right, looking pretty good. All right, so now let's get our front panel connectors going. This is extremely hard to find, so look at your motherboard manual to see where you can find it. Also, here's where it's going to get a little bit more tricky because these connectors are even smaller than the one from before. All right, so that one's usually going to be near the RAM, near the 24-pin connector. Sometimes it varies where it's at, but usually it's near that area. So let's get our power switch connected first because that's the most important connection. Also, keep in mind for the power switch, it doesn't matter which orientation you plug it in. Let's do that again real quick from a different angle. All right, so when you're trying to figure out which one it is, the motherboard manual will tell you which color to plug in or which specific area. See how I've aligned it to look like it's on my motherboard? It says PW minus PW plus power switch. So I'm gonna need to plug it into the pin that's missing. Now let's do our reset switch. Same thing. So find the corresponding area and plug it in. In my particular case, it was right next to the power switch. So reset switch and power switch makes sense that they're next to each other. Your motherboard might be exactly the same. All right, now that we got those plugged in, we're pretty much good to go. You can plug in the hard drive LED and the power LED if you like, but those are really not necessary and they're kind of annoying. So keep in mind that you really don't have to plug them in if you don't want to. Let's do a little bit more cord management here and get this looking a little bit nicer. All right. What I do is I wrap the extra cords in and then I tuck them away. That's really the best way to manage most cords. Tuck them around areas or places you can't really see them. All right, it's looking pretty good. Nice, simple $300 build. Will run all your games, will play all your movies, and even do productivity. Pretty impressive stuff. If you want to see what the home theater system is like, it's pretty awesome. I highly recommend you at least take a peek at it for at least a minute or so. It's extremely small in comparison to this tower build here. I even have one that's the size of a power supply, even smaller. So 2 home media PC builds. Take a look at it.
left side.
Thank you.
Let's try anti-aliasing the weight of a vertical sink. Haven't done that in a while. I want to be careful. Being in the grass this close to them. Risky business. Oh, that was close. Holy shit. Did you see that he fired his gun?
Yep.
Damn. Whoa. My god, this thing's a freaking beast. Oh, god. Uh-oh. What the heck is this? Pterodactyl. Or something. Oh, it is. Axis freaking looks pretty dang good. Kind of shit you'd see where it's like a bird, half dino. Some impressive stuff right there. Can I just get this down here to protect me?
polygons. Oh my.
We're going to look at the components that it takes to make a PC. We're going to talk about each component and strictly what it does and not necessarily how to install it. If you want to look at that particular section, just follow the index and take a look at how to assemble the computer. So at the core of the computer, you have basically just a motherboard. The motherboard is going to connect all the peripherals and all of your microchips and all your stuff together. It's essentially the main connection point for all of your hardware. Here you have your CPU. This kind of acts as like the brain of the computer. It does all the arithmetic and crunching of the numbers. It's very similar to the brain, but it doesn't do any storage, which our brain does CPU and storage at the same time, so this is kind of different. Here we have a heatsink. This item here is designed to basically cool the CPU as it's doing work because lots of electricity flows through it, and essentially it just gets extremely hot while it's working. The RAM is the temporary storage facility for when you access data. So you have a hard drive or an SSD drive, and then you also have RAM. Information goes from the storage or the hard drive to the RAM as a temporary point when you're working with it. Think of it as a room that you can work in. When you load information, it's just stored there, and then when you shut your computer off, the information from the RAM is purged. Next up, we have our video card. The video card is just like a CPU, except it's mostly designed for crunching the data for video related tasks. However, a video card can be optimized to do other things. It's mostly optimized for video. This particular card here, it's the RX 460, and it's designed for gaming. It's got 4 gigabytes of video RAM. So video card also has RAM, just like the RAM you'd put in your motherboard, but it's specifically designed for video. On the back of it, we have some I/O ports, inputs and outputs, and here you can see we also have a heatsink on it as well. Let's take a look at what our storage drive looks like. So here's an SSD storage drive. On this drive here, you're going to store most of your files like Windows. You always want to store your most important files on your actual hard drive, like Windows for instance, so it loads fairly quick. We can also try connecting external hard drives if you need more storage, or other drives that can also act as like places to store your video games, your photos, your work files, that kind of thing. But always try to get a separate drive where you can store your operating system to make things a lot snappier. And a good example of this would be waiting for a computer to boot up. It could take anywhere 2 to 3 minutes, sometimes 5 minutes with some older computers. Instead, with an SSD drive, it'll take anywhere from 20 to 25 seconds to boot, so it's substantially faster. Once you insert your CPU and RAM, here's what it'll look like. When building a computer, you want to define what your budget will be. You can either build a computer for $1,000, $500, or $300. The most important part will be the CPUs and the GPU, as well as the storage. Those 3 things are the most important things when it comes to building a computer. Depending on which type of configuration you do, it'll determine the speed of your overall computer and how well it gets things done. Right now we're looking at the Core i7 unlocked 7700K processor. This is going to run you about $300. This is what you want to get if you're an enthusiast level person who wants the most performance out of their computer. Here's a Pentium processor. This one here is about $50. This is what most people should be buying if they just want to play games or do basic productivity. Here is an AMD APU processor. This processor is quite different. It incorporates 2 separate things. It has a CPU and a GPU in one. Essentially, if you get this, you won't need a video card. However, it won't perform as good as having a video card separately and a CPU separately, but it does save on costs, because then you won't need to buy a video card and other components. An enthusiast level video card would be something like the GTX 1080 or GTX 1070. Even the GTX 1060 is considered pretty good. Here we have an AMD version, the RX 460. It's about $100, fairly cheap. 4 different types of storage drives you can get. You can get an M2 storage drive, which can be extremely fast, or you can get a Sata drive, which would be pretty good. This is what most people should be buying. It'll run you about $100. The M2 drive that we saw earlier is going to run you a couple $100, and then this PNY one here will run you about $50. Same thing for this laptop SSHD. It's going to run you about $50, but the benefit of the laptop SSHDs is that they have a lot more storage. I wanted to say thank you for watching this particular video, and it's true that even though it's a $400 gaming PC, it can actually game, and it can game pretty well. There are a few titles here and there that may struggle, but you can still optimize the graphical settings to get them to work good. For instance, like Ark Survival runs on medium to lowish. You can run it at 1080p if you'd like, but dropping down to 720p does make it more playable. You know, every now and then you do run into these indie, game titles that just aren't very optimized, and that will happen from time to time. Even on my $1,000 gaming computer, Ark Survival is still pretty darn hard to run, and it just depends on the game. I mean, you look at games like Grand Theft Auto can run on integrated graphics on high, while games like Ark Survival that look graphically similar don't always perform well. My question to you guys is, what kind of gaming PC do you want to build? Are you guys coming from gaming consoles? Have you ever built a PC before? And how much are you looking to spend? I will be replying to all comments, so if you guys do have any questions about how to build your own gaming PC, I definitely do want to help you guys out. And if you haven't pushed that subscribe button, I highly recommend you do so, because I do want to make videos for you guys. So if you guys want to see a particular video in the future, go ahead and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section below what you want to see, and I highly recommend you take a look at some of these cards above here in the little corner button here. Press it, take a look at the cards, because there will be some awesome videos that I want you to take a look at. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers. Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy Serge. So I wanted to talk to you guys about Patreon. This is an amazing platform that allows you to donate to creators that you really like and want to support. So the point of this is to essentially support creators and to give them the funds they need
so they can continue to reinvest into YouTube and build a much better channel. So right now I'm spending most of my time at my day job, and it's something that, you know, I do it because I need it, because I do need the money, and I try to do a good job there. But my actual dream is to be the YouTuber, to do a really good job on YouTube, and to do that I'm gonna need to increase the video quality. I'm gonna need to make better sound, better video content. I need to spend more time, and I can't really do that unless I have a day job. Now the thing is, if I can get a certain amount of you guys to donate, I've done some calculations, about 3 to 5% of you, if you guys can donate and pledge support of $1 or $2 or more, I can seriously quit my job overnight. Now the reason for this is because there's about 10,000 of you, so not a lot of you have to donate, but the thing is, it does go a long way, because I've already spent thousands and thousands of dollars and countless hours on developing the channel idea, you know, creating the thumbnails, creating the video, and replying to your guys' comments, because I do spend about an hour to 2 hours every day replying to your guys' comments alone. So I really hope you do consider this as an opportunity to help develop the channel. Any of you who are donating to the channel, pledging support, I will have direct contact with you guys, so that'll take priority over normal questions on YouTube. I'll always answer your guys' questions first. So that to me is really exciting, because that shows that you're a super fan, that you really do care. I'm also going to be allowing you guys to really have your hand in the development of the channel itself. So are you looking for me to expand the channel? Do you want me to create more, you know, HP videos as opposed to Alienware videos? What kind of videos do you want me to create? You know, I'm going to stay in complete contact with you guys. So thank you for watching, guys, and I hope I could convince you to pledge your support. I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.